Good morning, members, auditors and guests. I formally open this meeting of the Audit and Standards Committee. Thank you for your attendance and for your continued commitment to the committee's work. Remember, this meeting is being recorded. I would like to welcome Councillor Lynn Dean, Councillor Greatrix for Councillor Tagg. I would like to welcome my new Vice Chair, Councillor Matt Wallens. And with that, we'll start the meeting. We'll start with apologies, please, Liam.
Thank you, Chair. I've received apologies from Councillor Bagley, Councillor Luca and Councillor Farrell.
Next part of the agenda is the declarations of interest. I would like to say, may I ask members to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests or other interests relating to items on today's agenda. In line with the Localism Act 2011, sections 27 to 23, failure to declare an interest or participate without an appropriate dispensation may place members in breach of the law. If any member requires a dispensation under section 33, please indicate so now. No. Okay. So, on to the next part of the meeting, minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of December. The minutes of the previous meeting have been circulated. Are members content to approve them as correct record? Aye. Aye. Moving on to item 4, the draft annual governance statement for 2024-2025. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. So I will take you through the draft annual governance statement for 24-25. This is a key part of the statement of accounts, which is also on the agenda this morning. So this is the assessment of the governance framework in place during 24-25. It covers the following headings: an overall conclusion on our governance arrangements, how we've conducted that particular review, so how on what basis are we forming that opinion, how the governance framework has improved during 24-25, and then a forward look on governance matters and areas for improvement, areas to keep an eye on during 25-26. So in terms of that document, that's included as Appendix 1. In terms of moving forward for 25-26 matters, because obviously we're in February 26, they'll be included within the annual governance statement for 25-26, and it is our intention to bring that draft version as part of the work that's being done to finalise accounts more quickly. That will bring the draft statement in after the end of June 26, so the next audit committee, I think it's the beginning of July, so you'll see the 25-26 statement at that meeting. Okay, so on to the document itself. At the beginning, you have an executive summary, so that's the overall conclusion that we're bringing forward for 24-25. How we've reviewed our governance arrangements, the effectiveness of our governance arrangements starts on page 24. One of the key sources of assurance is the internal audit work. And you saw the opinion that comes to the committee from the work that Debbie oversees as part of her Chief Internal Auditor document. So an adequate assurance was given regarding our control framework, and the basis for that conclusion is outlined. Also, a key source of assurance is from our external auditors, and within the document we've reflected how we're going to build back from where we've got to in regarding the outstanding audit opinions. Nationally, this situation we've reported through to you on that basis. So disclaimed opinions have been issued, and these were presented to the Audit and Standards Committee in December 24. The next element that we consider is the financial resilience of the Council, and in compliance with the SITFA Financial Code, Management Code, our finance colleagues assess the resilience of our arrangements in the form of a self-assessment, and that concluded that there were no issues in respect of our financial resilience that needed to be considered. The final outturn position for 24-25 indicated an underspend of 5.3 million and was presented to Cabinet in June 25. So that shows that we were in a position of financial resilience. The next area considers our statutory officers and whether or not they've actually had to use their official powers that they have. That particular paragraph highlights that they haven't and there was no issues to report. In terms of individual governance arrangements throughout 24-25, reports were brought through to the Audit and Standards Committee regarding how the Constitution has been reviewed and improved. And during September 24, a working group was established to ensure that members' views and suggestions were captured in relation to the Constitution, and that was reported through in any with changes that were adopted at full council at their meeting in March 25. During 24-25, the health check, the governance health check arrangements continued, and that was overseen by the Corporate Assurance Board, and the aim of the exercise was to provide assurance that governance arrangements were in place. And working effectively. The health check itself is designed to ensure that the council maintains outstanding internal governance arrangements. And that exercise concluded that there were no major issues to report and to be considered as part of the annual governance statement. The LGA self-assessment tool was also used during 24-25 to have a look and make sure that the governance arrangements were effective as well, and that was reported through to the Statutory Officers Group, and again that found no significant issues. In terms of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee arrangements, that also is reviewed, and taking the annual reports that are generated through those committees. That report was presented to full council on the 17th of July. Excuse me, and no issues were identified, significant issues were identified. Annually, the Code of Corporate Governance is also reviewed. That review is overseen again by the Corporate Assurance Board and also comes through to the Audit and Standards Committee for approval effectively, and then that is published on the website, and all officers and members are required to have adherence to that particular code. The Information Governance Report was also reported through to the council, through to Audit and Standards Committee, and again provided assurance that the information governance practices within the council are appropriate, current and adhered to consistently and well communicated. That's also supported by the annual Civil Contingencies Report, so again providing assurance that our arrangements for dealing with business continuity, etc. are appropriate. Excuse me. The Health and Wellbeing Report for 24-25 was actually presented at the December meeting, and again members were able to see how we provide assurance that our health, wellbeing and safety arrangements are in place. Another source of assurance is having a look at how we manage risk management, and the policy is being updated. This is published on Staff Space for all staff. There is significant progress in addressing and improving risk management arrangements, and that has continued into 25-26. There's suitable whistleblowing arrangements in place, and they are publicised within the organisation and externally. The review of complaints received in 24-25, firstly in relation to the local Ombudsman report that came through, and there were improvements to be made in that, and you will see that's been captured as an area for improvement within the last section of the report. There were also issues in relation to complaints, and again another further action has been identified as to how we can improve that process, and that will be carried forward into 25-26. Annually, the Audit and Standards Committee produce a report summarising the content of our work, which then the chair of the committee reports through to full council. That report was produced. A Standards Matter annual report is also produced for 24-25, and that summarises standards matters, and again that identified some areas for improvement. Performance management arrangements are also continually being strengthened, and the way in which the integrated performance report has been developed, that then also flows through to Cabinet, outlining how we are meeting our strategic objectives. Key part of areas related to the Ofsted inspection report that was received in January 24, and during 24-25 work continued through the appointment of the new DCS, Director for Children's Services, and having that rigorous plan that she has put in place to deal with those weaknesses that were identified within the Ofsted report. Also, an LGA focused peer review was undertaken, and that also helped to feed in and provide sources of assurance to the DCS for how the control environment could be further strengthened. One area of outstanding success related to the adult services and the CQC inspection that's been obviously promoted throughout 25-26, but within February 25, the CQC came and did the inspection and concluded that we were a good authority in that area. So the next section looks at how we've improved our governance arrangements. The action plan relating to the 23-24 AGS is attached to the rear of this report, and updates members and updates the AGS process of how we've taken and worked with those issues and strengthened those areas for improvement. So firstly, specific governance training has been developed and rolled out regarding finance and procurement regulations, and then also the legal democracy and governance arrangements, so how we make decisions and the processes that we have to adhere to, as also that training has been identified and rolled out through the Learning Hub to relevant officers and staff. Okay, in terms of the key lines of inquiry, again, that Chloe process is a real step improvement in our governance arrangements, and gives a very early indication of any issues that are arising, and they can then be fed through to the statutory officers group. So I moved on now to the forward look for governance and areas for improvement. So these have been discussed with relevant directors. There is an ongoing flavour to these. These are matters that the organisation will continue to ensure they've got appropriate arrangements in place, and where necessary take action to ensure that they capture and improve systems accordingly. So, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions in relation to the document before my voice gives out.
Yes, thank you for that presentation. I've got one question. Can the Chief Executive Monitoring Officer and Section 1.5 Officer each provide a written statement confirming that, based on the evidence from internal audit, external audit, the AGS action plan, CLO returns, KLOE returns, risk registers and statutory inspections, Ofsted CQC, there are no undisclosed legal, regulatory, financial, cyber or safeguarding compliance failures or control weaknesses that could materially affect the council services or finance? And where issues do exist, i.e. Ofsted, send, complaints, timelines, third-party cyber assurances, LGR readiness, that there are time-bound, resourced action plans with clear owners, milestones and measurable outcomes, and that slippage will be escalated to this committee. Thank you.
Yes, we can provide that assurance.
Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Chair. Two short questions, if I may. So on page 25, it talks about one of the actions being that schools are going to start using AI. Are there any confidentiality or data protection issues with that being done, especially around schools regarding send and protected characteristics, etc.?
Okay, thank you. In relation to that point, we use AI as part of the CCM programme, so the Continuous Controls Monitoring Programme within the internal audit process. So in terms of the confidentiality, all our work has the appropriate confidentiality arrangements attached to that. So yes, we'll be able to provide that.
Regarding obviously with AI though, as soon as you put the information in there, it goes off to the company that controls it. They can obviously view those details and things. So how do we stop that, obviously special stuff, from being viewed by those companies effectively?
Our data doesn't leave the council, so whatever we do in terms of using AI, it stays solely within the county council, so there's not those confidential issues that would arise.
So on page 31, the Ombudsman criticised the council for 62% of the inquiries being late in 24-25. So what steps were taken in 25-26, and what would we expect this percentage to be now, please?
This document is the AGS for 24-25. Within the 25-26 document, which will come forward, we'll be able to provide that update in terms of those. Obviously, with the within the action plan, within the areas forward look on governance, we've got that action as to review that area, so that obviously we don't repeat that position. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Baker.
Hey, thanks for the report. I just want to go over the review of complaints, because that went to my committee in September, and it says here on page 31 there is late inquiries, but it says that there is an improvement plan. Would you be able to go into detail what this improvement plan is, and how is that going to be reflected in this year's, when it comes to the September committee? What's in the plan, and how are we trying to improve this, and when should the results be reflected to?
Sorry, so you ask that's in relation to the 25-26 process. So it will be reflected. We'll review what's actually taken place as part of our review of the effectiveness of the governance arrangements, which is that piece of work is to start shortly. So that will pick up those issues that you've raised as part of the work that's been done in 25-26, and we'll bring that as our assessment of that as part of that next report. Thank you.
Councillor Pert.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, fellow councillors. Thank you for the report. Always a lot in here. It's like a sort of like an onion, isn't it? You know, there's many layers of assurance, with lots of checks and balances to make sure that they give us the same overall view. So I accept that this is the annual statement of corporate governance looking principally backwards. And I was going to ask about the whistleblowing numbers for this current year and code of conduct, but I think I can wait until June. But maybe the acting leader should have been aware of the whistleblowing numbers, because I asked him a very similar question on Thursday at the main council meeting, and he wasn't even aware of the policy on whistleblowing. So that may be something that you might want to share with him in due course. I also accept that, and your comment about adult social care was interesting. I always refer to it as a strong good, because there's a big range of numbers within good.
Point of order, please, Councillor.
Sorry?
Is this relevant to the...
Well, I think the reference from the officer, unless I was asleep when she said it, and when I read it in the report, was... Just let me get there. Sorry, were you asked to speak by the chair? Thank you. So, I think my point really simply is that actually it's a strong good, and I'm disappointed in some ways the document doesn't reflect that it was a strong good, because we're within the top 5 authorities in the country with that result. So that's my first point. Second point is, I accept where we are in terms of the recovery of the audit accounts. Really difficult place to come from, real big shortage in the industry of people, external audit obviously. And so I think that's a credible place to be, and obviously this meeting is part of the recovery of that process. However, the bit which concerns me slightly is many of the risks you look at going forwards are about sort of, you know, general business as usual risks. You know, AI, you know, it's happening to every organisation. The bit which I'm more concerned about is your local government reorganisation block, because frankly the nearest date you've got, or the only date you've got in there, is July, and frankly July is not far away, and actually the 1st of April 2028 with a new functioning organisation is also not far away, and I would be interested to see some greater detail in terms of some of those key milestones, because frankly if this organisation doesn't work, there are, you know, thousands of vulnerable people who will be at risk, and I would like to have seen some greater thought to that paragraph, because I don't see anyone talking about it, and frankly it'll be right on top of us.
Thank you. In relation to the last point regarding LGR, yes, I think it's very much a moving target or moving feast, and that will be reflected, those milestones, in the 25-26 aspect. Thank you.
Councillor Grouchix.
Thank you, Chairman. It's worth starting out by saying there's a lot of positives. It's a very comprehensive analysis of 24-25, where obviously there's overall adequate assurance, which is good to see. It's referring to various improvements that have been made, children's services, and the improvements that were required from January 2024, the AI governance framework created, and the highway services roadmap implemented. Obviously, having said all that, I'm going to pick out some negatives and just want some comments on those. And the two negatives, just to get more information about, referring to the pages in the document, page 25 refers to the fact that 19 of 21 schools had limited assurance, mainly because of what looks to be payroll issues. And I'm well aware that the academies are responsible for the running of the schools in most cases, and therefore it's their payroll. But it does have an effect on the image of the county council, and also from a payroll point of view, a fairly direct employee effect, which might have repercussions for our pension system. So have we made some improvements? I know this is a looking backwards report, but have we made improvements in the way that we're dealing with the academies to get that improved? And then secondly, in terms of have we made improvements, it was identified on page 31, a complaint from the Ombudsman that there were 4 occasions of delays to provide returns, which is obviously not a satisfactory situation. It refers to how unsatisfactory it is to have that happen. And have we made improvements to our methodology in returning information to the Ombudsman?
Thank you. So in terms of the first point, I'll ask Debbie to come in, because obviously this is the internal audit opinion, so she'll be able to update you with regard to the schools.
Thank you, Lisa. So, yeah, following the 24-25 set of results for schools, we've produced an awful lot of self-help checklists that are on the Staffordshire Learning Net that will hopefully help people and schools get it right first time. That's around governance, purchase cards, payroll processes. We also do an awful lot of comms as well in relation to best practice and also anti-fraud controls and fraud awareness as well. All of that hopefully combined helps schools to understand the importance of good governance, good financial management. So we are continually working with schools. We also attend Bursars Forum as well, just to also highlight some of the common key sort of findings over the course of the year, and again just try and really help schools get it right. So there's a wealth of information on the Staffordshire Learning Net, and we constantly update that as a result of our 24-25 outcomes.
And the second point was in relation to the Ombudsman, and in terms of how quickly we're sending that information. Yeah, I think it picks up Councillor Baker's point in relation to the work that's being done in that area and how that's been evaluated, and we'll bring that back as part of the next time's 25-26.
Back on the comments that Debbie made, is it, from what you're saying, is it more of a training need in the case of most of the staff within those academies rather than a resourcing need?
In some cases it can be resources, because at some of the smaller schools they only have, say, one bursar, so therefore they fall foul of maybe separation of duties. In other cases it is around awareness of the school's procurement regulations and the financial regulations, so there's a combination of both awareness of requirements, responsibilities, and in some cases resources and what they have available.
I have a question, a point of clarification as well, please. Can the monitoring officer and section 151 officer each confirm that based on the evidence presented in this year's governance review, there are no unresolved risks, control failures or compliance issues that could expose the council to legal challenge, financial misstatement, regulatory breach or service failure, and if any exist, have they been explicitly disclosed to this committee with residents in mind? Thank you.
So, as previously stated, Chair, within the report, that's what this tries to outline.
Point of clarification, thank you. So we'll move on. Francis, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report, Lisa. Really good to see that there's multiple assurance sources, external audit, LGA, Ofsted, QC, Q. I think it gives members some confidence, which is good. Do you think, though, the report is overly reassuring, given the scale of non-weaknesses in children's services, SENT, complaints handling, and the audit disclaimers?
I think we've pulled out those issues and it's been included as part of the overall conclusion, but we've identified that there are issues in relation to the outstanding actions regarding children's services. So yes, I do think it has pulled those out.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a summary document and it's there to provide an overview, a summary.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Yes.
Councillor Wallens.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the warm welcome as well, and thank you, Lisa, for the annual statement, the governance statement. It's a very well detailed report indeed. I just only got the one question on this one. Where do you still see our biggest governance vulnerability? Is it the use of AI or the lack of cyber security, etc.?
I think to answer that question, I think the issues that we wanted to pull through as part of this particular statement are outlined in that last section, a forward look on governance. So I think it's all of those really, they are the key aspects to consider moving forward in 25-26 and beyond. Okay. Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, moving on to item 5, training on statement of accounts. Rachel, please, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. I have a few slides to show you all this morning, just ahead of the item on the 24-25 statements of accounts. So the purpose of this is really just to take you through a few salient features of the accounts that I accept they're a very large document. So this sort of training session here is just meant to point out the main areas of focus for you and just to give you some tips on where to check for the most important numbers in here. So if I can just take you through what the purpose is and the format of the account. So why do we produce accounts? So basically, the requirement to produce the statements of accounts is part of the accounts and audit regulations. So we have to produce a statement of accounts for each financial year. And the chair of the committee of the relevant body must sign off and approve those accounts. So for this authority, that's this committee, the Audit and Standards Committee, and the chair obviously will sign the accounts if they are approved by members today. The accounts show the income and expenditure of the County Council through the financial year. So the financial year we're talking about here is 24-25, so it is a backward-looking document. It shows us how much the services cost to provide in that financial year. It shows us how we funded those services as well. It also includes the balance sheet, so it shows us our total assets and total liabilities as at the 31st of March. And because it includes the numbers from the previous years, you can also see any changes from prior years and track those through. There's a whole raft of rules that we need to follow when we are producing the accounts. And the main set of rules is the Local Authority Accounting Code of Practice, which is produced by SITFA. It's updated annually, so any changes to international financial reporting standards are incorporated into the annual update, and then we obviously comply with those for each financial year. So every year the accounts are prepared. They're then signed and dated by the responsible financial officer, which is the Director of Finance and Resources, and he will sign to say that the accounts present a true and fair view. That's the wording included in the accounts and audit regulations that we have to put at the front of the accounts. And obviously we use the accruals concept when we prepare the accounts, so expenditure and income relating to that financial year is shown within that financial year, regardless of when it was paid or received. So the accounts and audit regulations also include the dates and the deadlines by which we need to produce the accounts. We've got to publish them on the website by the 30th of June every year. We also have to include a period of 6 weeks for public inspection, so this is advertised on the website as well. But obviously there's also the Freedom of Information Act, which allows residents to ask any questions around our finances outside of that 6-week public inspection period. Our external auditors are not appointed by the County Council, they're appointed by the Public Sector Audit Appointments Limited, and currently we have KPMG as our auditors. This is the second year that KPMG have audited our statements of accounts. The contact details for KPMG are included at the front of the accounts, so residents can actually contact the auditors directly should they wish to raise a particular and specific concern with them. So again, the Accounting Code of Practice sets out the format that we must follow when we prepare the accounts. It starts with a narrative statement, so this is a general introduction and the overview of the financial position in that financial year. It's also, because the accounts are very much a backward-looking document, it does include an outlook section just to have that forward glance as well. The accounting policies are in there, so that's a description of the rules that we've used to prepare the accounts. And then really the most important part is the financial statements and the notes. So there are 4 financial statements. These start on page 74 of the pack and run to page 77. And then there are a whole raft of notes that support the financial statements. So on each financial statement, there's usually a reference to the note that will then tell you about that number in a bit more detail. So on the income and expenditure statement, there are references to the various notes which will break down the numbers in that statement into a little bit more detail. We also include the pension fund accounts. So obviously, as the administering authority for the pension fund, we include their accounts just at the back of the county council's accounts, so that's included in the overall document. But obviously, the pension fund is entirely separate. So just to highlight a few differences this year in the financial statement. So in the comprehensive income and expenditure statement, this is where you can see how much our services have cost to provide in that year, and also the sources of funding that we use to fund those services. We've resulted in a net surplus this year, and there was a surplus last year as well, so not a great deal of change really between those 2 years. And then note 9 will tell you a bit more about that surplus if you want to see that. On the balance sheet, we've got obviously the top half is assets and liabilities, bottom half is the funding, which is our reserves. Reserves are split into 2 categories, usable and unusable. Usable reserves are, like the name suggests, they can be spent on activities, they are cash-backed reserves. Unusable reserves are not cash, they're not represented by cash balances. They are a notional transaction which is required to comply with some of the accounting rules. So only the usable reserves can actually be spent. So in 24-25, the net assets have increased slightly since 23-24, and the reasons for that are, there's various reasons, but the main reasons are that the pensions liability is reduced. So the pensions liability is provided to us by the actuary. The actuary takes into account numerous assumptions when coming up with the figure for the pensions liability. And this is really a very hypothetical liability. It represents the amount that we would have to pay should all pensions be payable on that date. So it's very much a hypothetical liability. It's not ever going to crystallise in reality, but it does sit there on the balance sheet. So we've had a couple of changes to debtors, a slight decrease in debtors, which is obviously good, meaning we've got our income in a little bit better than in 23-24, and then an increase in cash as well at the 31st of March. And also a reduction in our long-term borrowing can be seen on the balance sheet. So in the bottom half of the balance sheet, we've got our usable reserves. They've also increased. If we've had an increase in net assets, there must be an increase in the bottom half as well. So we've got an increase in our usable reserves slightly. And just to highlight a couple of numbers there, general balances are 62 million and schools balances are 19 million. So schools balances, like the name suggests, can only be spent by schools. That money belongs to the schools. We can't spend it on any other county council services. And when schools convert to academies, they take their share of that balance with them. Unusable reserves have also increased, but like I said before, these are not cash backed, so that's not money that we can spend on anything. The movement in reserve statement is on page 75, and that gives quite a bit more detail on the reserves and also the changes from previous years. So just a sort of forward look now, because when we prepare the accounts, we must also certify that we are preparing the accounts on a going concern basis. So we need to have that note, which is note 1 to the accounts, the first note that follows the financial statement. So the most important note in some ways, which does set out our rationale for the county council being a going concern basis. So what we're saying is, despite impacts of inflationary pressures and increased demand for services around children's services and home to school transport and SEND transport, we did achieve a small underspend in 24-25 of £5 million, so that's increased general balances. And so for those reasons, plus a few other reasons set out in the note, we are content to say that the County Council is a going concern. So just a few words on the pension fund. So obviously that they're included in the accounts, but it is an entirely separate entity. All the cash is kept entirely separate from the cash of the County Council. The pension fund take their reports to the pensions committee, so they reported already to the pensions committee for their accounts, and they also produce a very detailed annual report which is taken again to the pensions committee and then can be found on the pension fund's website if anyone wanted to see that. So just a bit of detail on the pension fund accounts. Just the high level overview is that the pension fund value increased from 23-24 to March 25, so it increased by 2.2% there. And that's obviously the whole of the pension fund, not just the county council's share of that. So that was all I was going to say this morning. Is there any questions anyone wants to ask?
Councillor Wallens.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, thank you for the presentation. It was very well detailed indeed. And just got the two questions on this one. Could we offer refresher or bite-sized sessions throughout the year so members in this committee that may have missed a session could catch up later on in the year? And the other question I've got is, can we make sure that during the presentations any acronyms are defined in plain English, please? Thank you.
Yes, we can have some bite-sized training throughout the year. I can liaise with member services to put something in place for that.
Councillor Humphreyson.
Thank you, Chair. Are we doing questions on the full draft statements now or just on the training? Just on the training, yeah.
Okay, moving on to item 6 then. Draft statement of accounts 2024-25, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the accounts are brought to you today and we are asking that the committee approve the accounts and also note that there are two management representation letters attached to the report, so one for the County Council, one for the Pension Fund, and we ask that members approve those as well. They will be signed by the Director of Finance and Resources and they provide assurance to the external auditors that the accounts have been completed in the relevant manner.
Councillor Humphreyson.
Thanks, Chair. I've got a few if it's okay for me to go through. So my first question is related to the Dedicated Schools Grant, which I've now seen that the government have funding up to 90% now. So how is that going to affect us? Are we likely to have to subserve the remaining 10% into our budget, or that's going to carry on as it is, where it's kind of a side bit out the way? That's my first question.
Thank you. Yes, so obviously that has been a recent announcement, so it's not reflected in the 24-25 accounts, and so we are waiting for some further detail, and we're waiting for the ever-promised white paper on SEND to maybe answer some of those more detailed questions. But our understanding currently is that 90% of the deficit will be funded, so that would leave us with the remaining 10% to fund, yes.
So that 10% is now going to be, rather than being as it has been, where it's kind of been put to one side and just left, is that now going to have to come as part of the full council funding?
So we are awaiting some further detail from the DFE, but potentially yes.
So the net cost of services increased over 59 million year on year due to inflation and service pressures. I can see with the service strategies we've got things like the contingencies, which is to protect the inflation for continuing to erode the surpluses. And I can see that in addition to that, I can see that we've shifted from short-term investments to holding more cash to maximise interest income. How long is this strategy sustainable if interest rates do generally tend to fall? And have we got an exit plan in place for that eventuality, please?
So if I can answer that, Councillor. So on a monthly basis as a Treasury Management Panel, we meet, and that's chaired by me, and we're constantly looking at where we allocate our assets, so whether that's in cash or in other longer term investments, to take on board the point that you've actually mentioned, which is where the risk sits and when we're going to need those funds. So that's constantly being analysed. So that's the end of the year point. It doesn't mean that would reflect today's position.
So the 15 million contingency wasn't required this year that we've seen on there. Again, as mentioned, rising service costs does relying on the contingencies mask underlying structural problems within the service budget.
So the MTFS report always contains a section on risk, and the contingency budget is set at a level to try to mitigate those risks should any of them crystallise. There are obviously numerous risks, so children's services and transport. I think we know what the areas of risk are. So the MTFS report covers those off, and the contingency budget is vital in terms of ensuring that we have funding should any of those risks crystallise.
Councillor Pert.
Thank you. Thank you for the very detailed report and all the numbers that go into that. I appreciate that. Just wanted to pick up a couple of things. First of all, surplus assets of 10.1 million. Presumably, they're surplus because you've identified a strategy to turn them into cash if we don't need them. That's the first question. Second of all, could you give us a breakdown of the property, plant and equipment number, probably outside of this room, because there's 2 billion in there, and I would be somewhat interested just to understand how that valuation looks, please, in terms of the detail. And the final question I got was cash at 327 million and cash alternatives. Is that too heavy?
So if I can start with the first question. So surplus assets, yes, to be in that category on the balance sheet, an asset must be being actively marketed, or there must be a plan to market it. So yes, those assets that are in that category are hopefully going to be sold at some point. On the PPE, we can discuss that outside of this meeting if you'd like some further detail on that, but I would initially just direct you towards note 12 in the account, so there's a lot of detail on the property, plant and equipment in that particular note. And cash balances, so the question about cash, I think I would probably refer you to the Director of Finance's answer to the previous question. So we monitor the cash levels monthly and we make decisions on investments and what's required in terms of cash on a regular basis in that forum.
Francis.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Rachel. The financial statements are really good coming after the training slides, so it just fits in. But I think it's important to maybe let the members know that it's not their job to understand every number in their accounts. What they are looking for is what the numbers are telling them about risk, about financial sustainability, about governance. Those are the things that they are looking at to understand whether the council is living within its means. Most councils that fail, they fail not because of accounting deficits. You can post a healthy surplus in the accounts and still run out of cash. So I think it's really important to explain that, to just make that clear.
Yes, thank you for that comment. I think it's really important and valid. Thank you for raising that.
Councillor Grotrix.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, collecting the good news stories of this 5.3 underspend for 24-25, which is good news. Better to be underspent than overspent. And similarly, 15 million of contingency budget not used and added to capital, which are good to report. The question I had was in relation to page 56, where there's discussion between the general reserve and the specific or earmarked reserve levels. A lot of it depends on how well we're profiling when we expect to spend our various bits of capital projects. Is the profile improving? Because it does involve quite a lot of slippage. Have we got any better at our profiling of making sure that we allocate the resources to the right year in the MTFS?
So there are always reasons for slippage, and a lot of those reasons are usually external factors outside of our control and can be things like the weather and so on. So constant monitoring is done to ensure that projects are delivered on time, and differences in funding and differences in the profile of expenditure will be reported quarterly through to Cabinet.
David?
So the two schools PFI contract is due to end in December of this year, December 26, so it's still ongoing currently, and that's why it's contained within the account, but obviously 25-26 will be its last year in there. So I believe it was signed in 2001.
Any more questions? Okay, moving on to item 7, report to those charged with governance, the ISA 260 2024-25, the Staffordshire County Council. Can I call upon KPMG, Mr Rob Fenton and Mr Richard Lee, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. So our first report is our ISA 260, and this provides an overview of our work on the accounts, on the County Council accounts in the year to date and our main findings. If I take you to page 4 to 6, this gives a bit of an overview of the statutory backstop circumstances and where we are in terms of that journey. It reflects the opinion that we, sort of part of the opinion we disclosed last year. We've reflected the disclaimer opinion and then give some assurances around why we've reached that same conclusion this year. There's then some context as to why we're in that position, which is similar to last year, but what it does reflect on page 6 is there has been improvement and progress on what we've delivered this year and our assurances over the financial statements. So page 6 lists, what we've managed to cover and what we haven't. And then with some context as some of the challenges that we've had, with predominantly again around the journals and the transactions listings, which has caused some of that delay. Page 218 of the pack just gives a summary of effectively our main findings in terms of the work around the significant risks. A couple of things outstanding that we're still working through or very close to concluding, and then a summary of our control deficiencies and correcting misstatements. Page 9 to 15 provides a summary of the work we've managed to complete on our significant risks around valuation of land and buildings, management override controls, and the valuation of post-retirement benefit obligations / your pension net gross liability. And it effectively summarises what we've managed to do and what we haven't. Obviously, we've concluded our work on the valuation of pension liabilities. There's still a bit of work to do on the valuation of land and buildings. We then touch on the work around the adoption of IFRS 16. That was actually early adopted in 23-24, but this year we've managed to progress that in terms of establishing the completeness of that lease liability, which isn't material, and so our sort of work is refined to reflect that. There's still a little bit of work to do on that. Page 229 of the pack, page 20 of the report summarises our work on the value for money. We identified a significant risk or a risk of weakness that we communicated in the November committee around the sort of Ofsted and the oversight of that and the implementation of the ILAX plan. We concluded that wasn't a weakness. which was pleasing. We were happy with the arrangements that are in place with respect to that. We did, however, raise what we call a performance improvement observation. So it's not effectively a sort of statutory recommendation that will make its way into our auditor's annual report, but one around the EHCP completion. So that's the education, health and care plans, around the target that the authority has to complete those within a specified time frame, and some of those challenges. But effectively that's well reported, and effectively it's about making sure that the authority and members are sort of, you know, that reporting is transparent and there's a continuing improvement to, you know, try and achieve that target as much as possible. The appendices take us through our sort of fees, independence considerations, and then our corrected and uncorrected misstatements. Just worth noting on the uncorrected misstatements, there is one additional to add there. It's not material, it's to do with sort of cash and creditor recognition. There's no impact on the reporting surplus or net asset position. So that will make its way into the final version of this report. And then on page 30 of our report, 240 of the pack, we take us through the control deficiencies, and they align to some of the findings that we had in terms of the challenges around the journals listing and the reconciliation of that, the quality and timeliness of evidence presented, and finally a piece on a proportion of the assets. I know one of the members asked about the valuation of land and buildings in his question earlier. There's a proportion of assets that aren't revalued, and so we've asked management to take away how they can assure us that over that proportion that there's no material risk of error there, given there's a requirement to make sure assets are valued at the 31st of March each year. I wasn't proposing talking about anything else in the report, but happy to take any questions on that.
Councillor Humphreys.
Just the one this time, Chair. So I'm looking to find out about the root cause of 7.4 million misclassification. So what caused this right of asset error? Right of use asset error that flagged, and what specific reconciliations registers would have prevented it?
So that relates to an asset that was yeah, so there was an asset that had been sort of incorrectly recognised because part of it was the land, part of it was the building, and it was just a sort of an error in terms of how that had been accounted for. I think it's a case of just being management just understanding the asset base that they're working with.
So what could have prevented that from being misclassified?
Possibly a question for management, I think.
So that particular example was a very complex lease, and I think it's just a human error that resulted in the misclassification, and I think to prevent that we would just need to strengthen our quality assurance processes, which we are putting in place as we approach the year end for 25-26.
Councillor Groutrix.
Thank you, Chairman. I can see one of the major observations that you've made in terms of risk assessment is the valuation of land and buildings. I can see also both sides of the argument that your stance should be that there should be an annual review, and therefore an annual review would be more up to date. But I can also see the benefit of what the authority is doing, which is to review every 5 years on a rolling basis. Because obviously there's a minimal amount of costs involved with only reviewing a fifth of the estate every 5 years. I just wondered whether, and I appreciate there is a comment here that there should be a recommended annual paper that takes account of any known large exceptions to the rule where there might be some significant changes in value. I just wondered, because you've got the option of comparing notes elsewhere, how Staffordshire compares to the best practice of other authorities. Does this rolling 5-year approach occur in other authorities, and is it accepted elsewhere?
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The rolling valuation principle is accepted practice and in line with the SIPFA code. What the requirements are for any authority is to ensure that that sort of what you could argue the non-DVS valued population, that assumptions are applied to get comfort that there is no material risk of error in that remaining population. So, for example, for specialised assets, the authority apply an indices uplift, which then means that there is then an increase in valuation or generally an increase in valuation for a proportion of those assets. But then there's this proportion where there's effectively no action taken, and I think we quoted it being around sort of circa 180 million. But there is a means of effectively just using benchmarks to establish whether there is a risk of potential movement there. But that is required regardless of the 5 year. You've got to make sure that the fair value of the assets as at the 31st of March are materially accurate.
Can I just come in on the end of that? This is an area as well where SIPFA is working quite hard to clarify its guidance around valuation going forward, and application of indices is going to become more and more the accepted norm for valuation. That in itself, though, does create some challenges for us from an audit perspective, because you're effectively indexing a position where we don't necessarily have an anchor to hold on to from a valuation perspective. So I expect this is an area that will continue to unravel over the coming years, but it's also been an area that's been debated and is challenging for authorities probably for as long as I can remember from an accounting perspective.
Just come back, I can also assess that there's be some volatility in the valuations from year to year, because property does change from year to year in valuation terms. So it would be wrong to sort of make too many assumptions from a yearly assessment, when really a longer term view is perhaps more accountants-wise beneficial.
Councillor Wallens.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the report. On pages 30 to 32, I've noticed on the risk side of things, there is, tell me ambers, sorry, there's 3 ambers and 1 green, and on the 1 green, they've got a manager or officer of response and a due date and a current status, whereas the other 3 haven't got anything. So can we get a manager response or an officer response with a potential due date in place as well, please? Thank you.
Yes, management response will be added to those other risks, and we can republish this report on the website.
Any more questions? Francis?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. Thanks, Rob. In the accounts, are there any red flags or emerging financial risks that members should be aware of, other than the cost pressures in SENT and children's services?
I think in terms of the value for money, because that's sort of linked to, I suppose, the value for money work, isn't it? I think in the November meeting, we did bring our value for money risk assessment, or our draft auditor's annual report. That is actually on one of the next items. But I think that gives us assurances and to you as members that we're sort of comfortable with the sort of financial sustainability arrangements at the organisation. I don't think there's anything specifically in the accounts themselves that I would deem a red flag. Obviously, we audit to a level of materiality, and that's the opinion we provide.
Thank you.
David? Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the process for rebuilding assurance takes longer, dependent on the number of disclaimed years that you've had. And so you're right, yeah, we have started that initial work, and our intention is to complete the sort of what we call a risk assessment around the rebuilding assurance process by the end of July. And obviously, yeah, we'll keep you up to date in terms of when we on that progress, and indeed, yeah, in terms of how long it will take us to rebuild that assurance work.
Thank you. Is that better? Thank you. I've turned it on. Okay. I was asking about the challenges within that KPMG have found within their audit work. They talk about on page 217 significant delays and the quality of audit evidence. And I wondered if there's been actions taken going forward so that for the current year, the next year, those challenges will be dealt with, and has that happened?
Yes, so as part of the conclusion of this year's audit, we'll have a detailed debrief with Rachel and the team. I think if you compare this report to the prior year, you'll know that some of the issues we had around quality of evidence, in particular around evidence around the care director expenditure, for example, have now been removed, and that was demonstrates one really positive movement, one step in terms of improving the audit process. There are some sort of new issues here around sort of payroll, and that's something that we need to work with management on. But that's something that's more of an internal sort of challenge that they've got in terms of dealing with third parties such as Entrust. But yes, in answer to your question, we will ensure that these actions are discussed in detail, and there's a plan in place to ensure that these are reduced or completely removed in next year's audit.
Just to follow on to Chair David, I think the area we talk about there is predominantly around journals as well, in terms of that's the challenge, it's a system problem. But we've started to think about next year's audit, and I think from our perspective it's encouraging that the team are demonstrating already that I think we were down at thousands of journals where we couldn't get the taxonomies to match together or the descriptions to match together. It wasn't that they're out of balance, it appeared they were, but it's just you need some more fields that weren't available. And I think that's down to 14 or 15 now till the end of January 2026. So, I think there's the point on the right-hand side of that page 7 of our pack is probably more encouraging than the stuff on the left. There's engagement from management, and that isn't the case across lots of authorities.
Any more questions? No, I'd just like to thank you for the presentation, but we need to go back to item 6. So, are members content to approve the items on the recommendations on item 6, which are recommend that members approve the 2024-25 statement of accounts as attached to this report as Appendix 1?
Yeah.
Right. Members approve the management letter of representation for the County Council at Appendix 2 for 2024-25? Right. Members approved the management letter of representation for the Pension Fund at Appendix 3 for 2024-25? Right. And members delegate authority to the Director of Finance and Resources, the Section 151 officer, in consultation with the Chairman, to make any final amendments to the accounts as deemed necessary by the external auditors. Aye. Okay, moving on to item 8, which is the report to those charged with governance, ASA 260, 24-25, the Staffordshire Pension Fund, and again, Mr Rob Fenton and Richard Lee, please. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I'll take this one. So this is the sort of the second element of our responsibility. So as well as the financial statements of the authority being in the accounts bundle, the pension fund accounts also sit within the same document, the same overall document. So I have a responsibility as well to audit the pension fund numbers, and so therefore this report is what accompanies that programme of work. I should say this report's already been through the pension board or pension committee and been discussed before Christmas, so it's coming here purely for completeness. It follows the same format in terms of content as what Rob's just described from an authority perspective. So it takes you through the audit risks that we identified, which were around management override of controls, which is a standard risk for all bodies from an audit perspective. And the other significant risk area is around the valuation of directly held property. And then there's commentary also around the valuation of other investments that the pension fund holds, and they are what we call level 1, 2 or 3 investments depending on their complexity. So it describes the work that we've done against those risk areas. They're audit risk areas rather than operational risk areas, so they're quite specific rather than necessarily what management may be dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And then it also provides you with confirmation that we're independent, misstatements that we've identified, albeit there's only one, and recommendations. So just to go back to those risk areas, as I said, management override of control is standard risk area. We identified a recommendation in the prior year, which is mirrored actually in the authorities report, so that remains in place. We've not identified any other issues in respect of management override. On the valuation of the directly held property, some of the numbers here are quite eye-watering, but we've done a programme of work across the fund's directly held asset portfolio. We've challenged Savills around a valuation methodology, and we've used our real estate valuation team to make sure that we're comfortable with the valuation methodologies. We did identify one asset where there was a difference between our expected valuation and the one that was provided by Savills, but the difference is significantly below our posting threshold, albeit that it is quite a large number, but it's one that we are comfortable to live with from a materiality perspective. As I said, we've also looked at the level 1, 2 and 3 investments across the pension fund's portfolio. So that involves a combination of looking for third-party confirmation of valuation. It involves looking at the net asset valuation statements and also challenging the financial statements of the funds into which those investments are made to confirm the numbers that are included in the accounts. We identified one misstatement, which was a timing difference between when the accounts for the fund were prepared and then the subsequent valuation statement that came through. It was £19.4 million different, but that has been corrected in the final version of the accounts. And as I said, it's due to a timing difference between management receiving the actual confirmation and their last known position. So I suppose it shows how significant those changes can be in short periods of time. And that's reported. We haven't identified any new control deficiencies, which I think is encouraging. Management have provided an update on the status of, I think it's 2 of the recommendations, which were around review of property and the review of the financial statements. I expect that the review of property recommendation will kind of live in our reports in some form or another for the duration of our appointment, because of where we kind of set the bar and where management can get to in terms of their internal processes. For the others, management are satisfied that the arrangements are in place currently are proportionate to the risk. So again, we'll have a think for future years around how we report that, and probably only bring back any comments to you where the situation changes. The final thing I should just say about the pension fund point is that we have completed all of the work on the pension fund audit. So if these were in a separate set of accounts, we would have signed off the pension fund already with a clean opinion, whereas for the authority, it will be disclaimed because we haven't got through all of the work by the backstop date. So I'll pause there, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that, for the in-depth presentation. However, I've got a point of clarification, if I may. Are there any matters, whether significant, material, judgmental or emerging, that you believe should be brought to the committee's attention, which have not already been covered in your written report or during this meeting? But I do appreciate your in-depth presentation and explanation. Thank you.
Well, for both audits, everything that we are required to report will be in these reports, so there's nothing further that we're required to report. And then the opinions themselves are the assurance that you take, so they're very specific audit opinions.
Any more questions? No. Moving on to item 9, Auditor's Annual Report for Staffordshire County Council. KPMG, Mr. Rob Fenton and Richard Lee again, please. Thank you.
Okay, this one's me again. So this is a report that is required to be presented to you at the end of the audit cycle. It's just for the council, it's not for the pension fund. It summarises basically everything that you've heard to date. So this goes on your website alongside the financial statements once everything's concluded, but must be published so that it can be seen by the public. It basically provides a summary of the financial statements audit process at a pretty high level, but everything in that summary is consistent with what you heard from Rob previously. And then the second part of this report is the value for money. So that starts on page 12. This is the detailed commentary that we provide over the 3 domains of financial sustainability, governance, and securing economy, efficiency, effectiveness in your day-to-day activities. There's quite a lot of detail. You saw the draft version of this before Christmas. The commentary has been updated just to basically add a little bit more specificity where we hadn't quite finished that commentary in the draft version, and I think that's predominantly around some of the reserves commentary under financial sustainability and under the governance domain in terms of the EHCP and ILAC's position. So Rob's mentioned already that we have made a performance improvement observation around that governance and send position, but what we haven't done is we've not identified a weakness, whereas we had a weakness in previous years. So there's a positive trajectory in that regard. So yeah, I don't propose to say any more on this than that, but happy to take any questions in light of the fact it's been through committee previously.
Again, I have a point of clarification, but my question is for you. Given the Ofsted judgment and the scale of governance and performance responsibilities involved, can the external auditor confirm whether they are fully satisfied that the oversight arrangements for delivering the ILAC's improvement plan are operating effectively in practice, not only on paper, and whether there are any early signs that progress might not be sustained over the medium term? Thank you.
Okay, so I think it's important to remember to look at the page 12 is probably quite a helpful position just to look at in terms of what our work covers on value for money. So it's a very, very specific programme of work. We're looking at the arrangements in place that management has operating only in the year from the 1st of April 2024 to the 31st of March 2025. We are considering those 3 domains that are referred to. So from our perspective, the ILACs and send position probably bridges all 3 of those domains to an extent. But what we have done is, management has demonstrated to us that there are arrangements in place to receive the Ofsted judgments and to monitor the judgments, that their financial impact of those changes that are taking place are understood and presented through to and escalated appropriately and are monitored. and that there is ongoing action taking place in terms of returning the service to a position where there aren't those Ofsted concerns. So from our perspective, we've considered the arrangements against the guidance, and therefore that's why we've concluded that we're satisfied that there are proper appropriate arrangements in place. What we haven't done is done a forensic review of the send delivery or reperformed Ofsted's work, because that isn't our responsibility and that falls outside of the remit of this work. We are just looking at the arrangements in place to respond to that particular risk.
Thank you. Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Chair. There's a few questions, if I may, probably more directed towards the officers. So first question is regarding page 215. So it's good that there are no high priority recommendations overdue. Are any of the medium overdue recommendations overdue by more than 12 months? And if so, what is the plan to remedy them?
Can you just clarify which page that is, please?
315.
315.
So we can see on figure 7, it's shown that there's 11 medium priority overdue recommendations.
Chair, can I come on to that when I present the report, because it's the next item on the agenda? Is that okay? Thank you.
So the next one then is the assurance gaps from the cancelled audits. Can you confirm how each cancelled review risks are being mitigated and whether any statutory or contractual requirements have been affected in this instance?
Councillor Humphreys, we're going to go through that now. Thank you. Any more questions? Okay, moving on to item 10, the Internal Audit Plan 2024-26 Progress Report. Debbie, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the regular progress report, giving members an overview of work carried out since the last progress report, and also giving some key highlights on key activities and key outcomes. So if I can ask you to turn to page 305 of your pack, which is where the progress report actually starts. Actually, page 307 of your pack. So in terms of this progress report, it provides a summary of work carried out up to the 4th of February. Also gives members an overview of our counter-fraud activities, as well as work from other external clients, and also a summary of the progress of the implementation of recommendations too. So since the audit plan has been approved, which was on the 22nd of April 2025, we continue to deliver against the audit plan. And as you would expect, towards quarter 3 and quarter 4 of the financial year, we've heavily focused on our key financial audits, as well as giving continuing support on key transformational projects. In terms of revisions to the original plan, as you know from time to time, the plan is not set in stone, and we do ensure that we are covering all emerging risks. So from time to time, audits will get added into the plan, as well as audits getting cancelled. So on page 308 of your pack, you will see revisions to the plan since the last Audit and Standards Committee. So there have been 4 additional pieces of work relating to some work in relation to an unincorporated association, a review of the procurement arrangements in relation to the countryside estate, giving some project support in relation to the out-of-hours emergency highway service, as well as giving some project support in relation to the skills boot camp, which is a government-funded scheme. But as you can imagine, we do have to ensure that the plan is balanced and that we can resource our work. So to bring the audit plan back into alignment with the resources available, we have cancelled some audit reviews, and they're attached as Appendix A to this report. And that relates to a number of areas, and I can go into those in a bit more detail in a little while. But those cancellations do not impair me in providing the annual outcome opinion at the end of the financial year. In terms of this report, I also give you a quick commentary on the latest HR and people type issues. So recently, in January, we were approved as part of the Design Authority to recruit to 3 auditor posts that have become vacant, 1 due to retirement and 2 due to resignations. So they have been advertised very recently, and hopefully we will successfully recruit into those posts. Because we do have vacancies at the moment, we are using an agency member of staff as well as using a framework contract to bring in some additional resource at the moment to ensure that the plan is delivered. Moving on to performance measures, they're set out in figure 1 on page 309 of your pack. And also the performance monitoring dashboards are set out in graphical format on pages 310. So overall, we've currently got 81% of our work is now underway at various stages of the process, be it planning, fieldwork, draft or final report. And I've also split down our work into systems audit work as well as compliance audit work. Moving on to our counter-fraud activities, we continue to undertake various strategic and fraud communications across the council and also specifically relating to schools. In addition, we regularly communicate best practice and requirements in relation to purchase cards and approvals and the review process leading up to the purchase cards being approved at the end of every month. A corporate fraud survey was also issued towards the end of 2025. We have had 84 responses, and again that will help to inform future fraud awareness campaigns as we go into 26-27. In relation to our proactive fraud activities, we continue to undertake continuous controls monitoring, which uses council data to look for unusual transactions such as unexpected or unusual merchant category codes and also various duplicate invoice payments. We have had 2 duplicate invoice payments, and that's detailed on page 311 of your pack. Since the last audit committee as well, we've also received back from the NFI the various data matches in relation to the council's care home residents and direct payment recipients, which has been matched against deceased WP data. Previously, I've reported that this data match has been excluded from the NFI exercise due to various legalities around the use of patient data because it was recategorised. That's now come back into play. We have had 124 potential matches, but it's pleasing to note there are no concerns there because those matches were in the pipeline of being dealt with in terms of people who died shortly before or just after the data upload, so it hadn't taken that into account. We have concluded our proactive piece of work on cash withdrawals. And whilst there was no sort of misappropriation, again, we've highlighted some recommendations to improve the control environment there. We've also had a very high-level review, look at the PayPoint systems where that was being used at these establishments. And as you can imagine, that has reduced the amount of cash that's being withdrawn on purchase cards. So that is one of our good intended consequences of the rollout of that new process. We've also looked at purchase cards that have been used to purchase gift cards. Now, we use gift cards from time to time for individuals, predominantly at schools as sort of rewards for pupils, and also from time to time for care leavers, maybe as part of if they've attended an event or to promote engagement for some scheme. And we looked at that, and again, we have just highlighted some recommendations and some control issues and recommendations have been made. We've also carried out a proactive review in relation to fuel cards, and again some control weaknesses were noted, and we've raised some recommendations to strengthen the monitoring arrangements in place. We also continue to look at legacy direct payments as well as part of our ongoing work in this area. And then finally, we have just completed a review of loans to special guardians and foster parents, as well. And again, there's just been some recommendations there to improve the control environment. In terms of our reactive fraud activities, so far for 25-26, we've had 21 allegations, 4 new ones since the last audit committee, and they're detailed in the right-hand corner on page 6 of my report, which is on page 312. Also, just to highlight to members that since the last Audit and Standards Committee, we have concluded a number of pieces of work, some sort of relatively big investigations, and they're detailed on page 313 of your pack. One in relation to an individual that seemed to have been working excessive hours, one in relation to emergency call-outs, which is on the agenda as part of the confidential section, one relating to an individual who has worked simultaneously at another local authority, and another investigation into the procurement of educational psychologists. As well as our work at the County Council, we also undertake work both at South Staffordshire Council and also Newcastle-under-Lyme Borough Council, and we do receive income in relation to that. Our work and where it is in the various stages is on page 314 of your pack. Finally, this report likes to bring to members' attention our progress on the implementation of past audit recommendations. So we use K10, I may have mentioned this before, which is our audit management system. It sort of governs the way that we work, produces the terms of reference, allows us to capture all of our work in relation to our work programmes and evidence. And the other thing that K10 does is it has a recommendation portal. So all recommendations are put within this portal, and it allows us to monitor the implementation of those. As of the 4th of February, we've got 2,456 audit recommendations that are being tracked. 86% of those have been implemented, which is quite a high number. We'd obviously like to always get it higher, but it's quite positive. And of those that are outstanding, we currently have 38 overdue recommendations. We have 0 high priority recommendations, 11 mediums and 27 lows. Of those recommendations, we do continue to track those, and we get regular updates. The auditees are required to provide regular updates and provide explanations where there are delays in implementing those recommendations, and we continue to keep that under review. So in relation to the cancelled audits, these are on page 316 of your pack, and as part of the cancellation sort of process that we go through, I discuss these with Lisa, and from time to time, we look at the risk as part of those, and we ensure that there aren't any impairments by cancelling these audits. Some of those audits get put into the 26-27 audit plan, and where we can, we will pick up some other pieces and coverage of that work in remaining audits. But they are there for your information. Chair, I'm happy to take any comments or queries in relation to this report. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I've got some questions, if I may. First of all, can the committee be assured that the 2025-26 internal audit plan remains deliverable by year end, and can you set out the impact of any cancelled audits on overall assurance coverage, including how any gaps have been mitigated or reprioritised, please?
Okay. So the 25-26 audit plan is fully resourced. Where we have had some gaps, we have used our contractors from the internal audit framework, and we also have an agency member of staff as well. But we do keep it under review as part of our audit management meetings and our liaise with Lisa. In respect to the cancellations that are detailed in the appendix, in some cases the pieces of work are no longer needed because, say, the project hasn't gone ahead, so that doesn't have an impact on anything at all. In other cases where we have cancelled, we've tried to draw upon those assurances, either the work, we may have done a piece of work in 24-25, so therefore there is no sort of risk to the council if that is then delayed or deferred into the new financial year. And that is our thought process as we look at those cancellations. We sort of look at it in its entirety. We look at the risk score from the annual audit planning process, as well as if there's any new emerging risks, and we make sure that the least riskiest audits are cancelled in the first instance.
Okay, thank you. My next question is, please provide the current status and age profile of overdue high-level recommendations, highlighting any that present material or sustain risk to the council, and the actions including any escalations to senior management being taken to secure timely closure, please.
Well, that's an easy one, Chair. There aren't any high-level recommendations, so that's good news. Thank you.
Thank you. And my next one, my final one, given the repeated identification of control weaknesses across purchase cards, cash withdrawals, fuel cards, payments to carers or contractors, what assurance can internal audit provide that these systemic financial control weaknesses are being addressed corporately and that managers are being held accountable for compliance, please?
Okay, so we do an awful lot of work and have done an awful lot of work in this area during 25-26, and we do work very closely with the payments team. I've currently just drafted the 26-27 internal audit plan, and as you would expect, this area continues to be within our counter fraud plan. We continually do an awful lot of data analytical work, and whilst we do report on the various sort of failings, in terms of purchase card usage, it's relatively small expenditure in comparison to things that are presented in the statement of accounts. So we will keep it under review. We do an awful lot of communications around deadlines and requirements for reviewing purchase cards and approvals, and our work does pick up where there is that non-compliance, and we continue to call it out, and we liaise with the relevant directors, the ADs. During 26-27, we're going to be doing even more work around recommendation tracking and dashboards, where we'll end up going to the directorate SLTs, where we can highlight this even more where it occurs. So we have got a handle on this, and we are quite hands-on, and we'll continue to communicate and publish those results.
Thank you for that reassurance for the committee. Councillor Wallens?
Thank you, Chair, and yeah, thank you for the report as well. Very well detailed indeed. Just to follow on from Councillor Jones's previous question about the high priority recommendations, I noticed, as you mentioned, there's 38 in total, 11 medium priority and 27 low priority that are overdue. I was wondering if we can employ the same principles to the high priorities to reduce the overdue cases that are on the medium and low priorities. Thank you.
Well, all recommendations actually, be them low, medium or high, do actually get the same attention. We send out the various notifications, and where they are delayed for longer, we do end up talking to the ADs about that. I do think the performance dashboards will hopefully improve that even more, and we can start to really home in on those medium level recommendations and even the low ones, but they get the same level of scrutiny, and auditees are supposed to respond in the same timely manner. But as you can imagine, from time to time there will be delays in implementing recommendations due to maybe something that's going on in the service or other issues.
Thank you. Councillor Greatrix?
Chairman, my question is related to the flexibility of the service. Obviously, it's good that we've got 80% audit completion by the target date, but I detect that there's quite a growth in the amount of both proactive and reactive counter-fraud. And Debbie, you mentioned about the potential to have agency staff. Does that give us the flexibility to get in additional counter-fraud staff specifically? Because that seems to be very much the growth area.
Yes, Absolutely. So we do use from time to time the internal audit framework, which has counter fraud specialists on it. So we do, and we did actually for 24-25 use a counter fraud specialist actually the previous year to do some of our work. So yeah, so we're constantly looking at resources, and where we need to, we will hire in specialist staff, either counter fraud specialists or IT specialists to do various pieces of work. And that's why we like the contract, because it does allow that flexible workforce.
Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, sorry for trying to ask me in the wrong section. I'd wrote the wrong agenda number down next to what I was asking. Part of my questions have been covered off by Councillor Jones and Councillor Waller, so I'm just going to tweak them slightly. In terms of the priority recommendations, are there any medium overdue ones by more than 12 months?
Can I get back to the committee on that? Because I don't have it to hand. I have got it, but it's just not on me at the moment.
And then, again, following up from the cancellations, again, Councillor Jones already asked about this. Were there any statutory or contractual requirements being affected on that?
No, there's no impairment at all, thank you.
And then, finally, obviously the next one's around the new head of audit, obviously replacing yourself. When is the new head of audit due to start? How will the absence of the head affect the department's work in the short term, both between appointing the new head and whilst new head gets up to speed?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll come in and respond on that matter. In terms of how we will deal with Debbie's departure, so starting next week, we're in the process of discussing with HR an acting up arrangement in relation to staff currently within the audit team, and then certain parts of the duties that are conducted by the Chief Internal Auditor, I will assume those in the interim. So there'll be continuity. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Francis, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Debbie, for presenting the plan. I think the plan is risk-based and prioritizes all the critical areas, which is good. But in your view, do you think that the Council has enough resources and capabilities to deal with the emerging risks like cyber security, AI, and all those areas? Because I've seen most organizations struggle in those areas.
So we are lucky enough to have an ICT audit manager, and he's very aware of cyber security and IRIS, and he's very proactive actually in the council, sits on various project boards in relation to various digital projects, and was part of when the AI governance framework came out. He was there also reviewing that. So it is great that we've got our own IT in-house audit specialist, but as Councillor Gretorix has pointed out, we can, if we so need to, supplement IT resources from our contract base as well, which we do from time to time to undertake ICT audit work.
Thank you.
David?
Thank you. Just I wanted to ask about the outstanding or the audit recommendations. The table at the beginning, at the top of page 315, gives all the audit recommendations, which I think is since the system started in 2016. So there's 2,500 on there, but that's the recommendations over the last 10 years almost. I wonder if it would be more useful for the committee if we also had that sort of breakdown for the recommendations made in the last year in future reports.
Yes, noted. That's fine.
Any more questions? Okay, moving on to item 11, forward plan for the Audit and Standards Committee. I call upon Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is our standard agenda item, really just giving members a flavour of the items that will be included on the next meeting of the committee, which is scheduled for the 17th of March. Happy to take any questions regarding this particular item.
Yes, I've a question. Can officers and KPMG set out the top 3 cross-cutting governance or control risks for 25-26, the named risk owners for each, and the milestones by which the committee will receive assurance that those risks are being actively reduced?
Thank you. So in terms of items that you wish to add to future agenda items, is that the question? Yeah, I mean, we can come to that as part of the item that we've got on the confidential part of the agenda, where we consider the risk register, and we can bring those forward and include them in the forward plan as necessary. Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? David?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I just have a question really, not about the content of the report, but the format of it. Looking at the columns, the ones on the right-hand side are not really used. I wonder if it's an opportunity coming for the coming year to look at the format and what information is on there, in terms of perhaps it's just the papers that are going to be presented, whether they were actually presented or not, and if not, postponed. And I just wonder if that could be looked at.
Okay, thank you. I have used the standard format from our MADS colleagues, but yes, I can have a conversation with them and we can have a look at that. Thank you.
Any more questions? No? Okay. Moving on to item 12, the exclusion of the public. That the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business, which involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in the paragraphs of Part 1 of Schedule 12A, as amended of the Local Government Act 1972, as indicated below. We'll also have a 10-minute comfort break. Thank you.